Okay, so today I'm talking about the Boleyn family, and so I'm talking about the ones we know most about, which is 5 of them. So we don't know quite a bit about any of them. We don't know the roots, we only know the names of one of the first people, and then we have things like and we know there was a priest in it called the Very Reverend Dr. Thomas Boleyn II, and we know a bit about these people, but I'll be talking about the ones we know most about. So, what I quite like about the Boleyn family is its motto, E Rege et Victoria, and that means to the king and victory, and that would have made the king quite happy, which is why they had that motto. So this is a family tree I made myself, and so the first person we'll be talking about is Mary Boleyn. And Mary Boleyn, almost the entire family seem to have a reputation for committing adultery. So Mary Boleyn is believed to have several affairs, including with King Francis himself. King Francis is said to have not been very happy with Mary when he found out she wasn't only having affairs with him. And in 1519 she returned to England, where she got a very important job and was appointed Maid of Honour to Catherine of Aragon, the Queen of Henry VIII. So we've talked about Mary, but next is George. And George was the only surviving son of Thomas Boleyn, Earl of Wiltshire. And that's very important. Very, very important, because that means he's the one who continues all the family's jobs. But in this case, he's beheaded before he can. So he only gets to become the second Viscount of Rochford, when he could have become the second Earl of Wiltshire and the second Earl of Ormond. He was accused of having an affair with his own sister, and the only evidence that they had to prove this was that he almost had a reputation for committing adultery or cheating on people. And so, we've talked about Mary, we've talked about George, and so next is their father, Thomas Boleyn. So, Thomas Boleyn was the first Earl of Wiltshire, and he was the first Earl of Ormond and the first Viscount of Rochford. Now that's quite a few titles to hold, including the word first, because the king favoured him. And he had done so many important jobs for the king. He was an ambassador to France for 3 years. He was the Sheriff of Kent for 2 years. He'd had been on several envoys, including one to the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, to help get an annulment. So he was incredibly important, which helped his daughter to get so many important jobs. And so we talked about Mary, George, Thomas, and now we'll talk about his wife, Elizabeth Howard or Elizabeth Boleyn. She was the eldest daughter of Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, who was a very important person, an incredibly important person. And so her father had served almost all the kings in the Wars of the Roses, and he finally ended up with Henry VIII. And it was very important to have the position of Duke of Norfolk because he was probably one of the most important people there. The picture you see here isn't actually from the... Well, no, we don't know that she is Elizabeth Howard even. This is the closest thing we have to her. It could actually be Anne Boleyn, we're not sure, but it's one of the only portraits that survived. And now, I'm sure you'll all be able to know who the next person is, but if not, what it is the most famous Boleyn, Anne Boleyn. And so I'm going to be talking about before Anne Boleyn became queen, and before she had her head chopped off. And so I'll be talking about her childhood, which I found actually slightly more interesting than her reign. So we don't know when her actual birthday was, though it seems most likely to be 1500 to 1501. And during a mission to the court of Archduchess Margaret, her father managed to get a place for her. And it's at Queen Margaret's court. And for the next 6 or 7 years, she worked there. She learnt the art of conversation and flirtation. She learnt the French language. She learnt all about fashion. And then she returned to England. But what's interesting here is Anne Boleyn had already met some very important monarchs, because the role that she was playing she would accompany Queen Margaret everywhere, and Queen Margaret was going to meet some of the most important European monarchs. Now this, I think, is the most interesting thing I know about Anne Boleyn, and I learnt it while trying to make this. And I found out about her coat of arms, which she pinned to a badge, which she had on a badge that was pinned to her. And I learnt what each thing represents. So there's the crown and sceptre, and as you can guess, that means that she is the queen. Then there is the stump, and I found this very intriguing, and that was that it meant that she was going to bring life to the dead, fruitless reign of King Henry VIII's previous wife. And so now this thing is a white falcon, and it represents the Earl of Ormond, which was Anne's father. It came originally from the Butler family, but then how the privileges worked, it came to Thomas Boleyn, who then got the job of the first Earl of Ormond, and so he, in the end, used the white falcon in the Earl of Ormond's arms, and determination is what it also represents. And what I found very interesting about roses, it's not, though they're red and white roses, it's to show how she'll return life to the stump. But it also shows that York and Lancaster Anne believes that York and Lancaster should never be one it never should be one house. They should always be separate. But it shows that how if they work together, then they'll get better results than if they don't. That's not to say that she wants... So that could be taken to Henry VIII as an offence, because it could mean she doesn't want the House of Tudor on the throne. But what she's basically saying is she thinks they should be separate and taken in turns or be fair and thrive together but not be the same. But of course, and I found that very interesting. And now, the end. And so I've taken you through the people we know most about in Anne's family and her childhood. And my favourite part was actually her coat of arms, which was a fun fact I learnt while researching.